Take us back to the original release. What what did you think at the time that you were working on it, at the time that it had been produced? Did you know you had something special?
Well, that's a very interesting question because this record, I started to work on it in Seattle when I used to live in Seattle. And most of it, of what I had worked on, got lost because when I moved from Seattle to New York, all my stuff got stolen, and including like every single hard drive and backup and you name it. So I didn't really have any music uh, with me at all. So I had to, when I start to work on new material, some of the pieces that are on the album are things that I could remember, like, you know, just playing it again essentially from memory because I didn't have any record of it. And so a lot of it actually got lost to time and whatnot because I'm pretty sure there were other pieces, demos, and things like that that I couldn't really remember how to do them. So that got, you know, tossed aside in a way, and I basically started all over it. So when I started the record after moving to New York, when I got here to New York, I didn't really have anything either. So I didn't have a studio or like any instruments or anything like that. So it was a bit of like a a lot of readjusting and a lot of building things back up again before I can even start working on any of the music, to be honest. Like that was kind of like my main priority was to get back to operational essentially. Um, so yeah, like it was a very interesting record to make in the sense that um, it completely changed the way that I write in a way, and it completely changed the way that I relate to what I write. Meaning, I think as artists, a lot of times we get in the habit of doing sketches here and there, and we may have like, uh, there's the thunder right there. Um, we may have like a big collection of ideas, over time. And, a lot of times, many tend to go back to those and like revisit them and, hear them again after some time and see how they feel again. And, so there's this kind of like almost like a crutch in a way that you have that you can always go back to and listen back to ideas you sketched out like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, or whatever, and have that as your almost kind of like your comfort zone of like, okay, I'm gonna go through here and like do this and do that, right? And in my case, I didn't have any of that. Like I didn't have any record of anything. So basically, uh, I could only work with what I could remember at the time. And that kind of really changed my approach, meaning that I wasn't, um, I guess, restricted by the baggage of all ideas. I didn't have anything, so I had to come up with another way of working. And the way that I started to work then was to try to remember pieces of music or ideas that I kind of thought how they should sound in my head, and then improvise those using a guitar or something like that, or a synthesizer, and then build from that. And that really kind of rewire a little bit of my brain in a way of how do I approach music moving forward and how do I make it. And ever since, I've been doing this exercise where I start to work on something, and then it's no longer like a bunch of random demos or sketches or anything of the sort. It's actually very intentional. So I'm actually writing with a purpose. So I will say, okay, I have an idea for a record like my last album that I released, The Sadisms, which came out in November on Black Note Editions. I started to work on that record conceptually back in 2016. That's when the first idea of it started, but I didn't actually start working on the music until many years later. And once I started to work on the music, every piece of music that I wrote was with that concept in mind. It wasn't just writing for the sake of writing, even though writing is a very good exercise. I encourage everyone to write as much as possible for sure. That is a very, it only makes you, um, you know, it creates a habit of and a good studio practice of just working on a regular basis because ultimately working on a regular basis and practicing your craft is what makes you develop it further. Otherwise, you just stagnate if you don't do it. It's like you hear a lot of times great musicians talk about why they're great musicians, and they'll tell you, well, because I just play every day. Simple as that. And a lot of them get the joy from that experience of just playing your instrument every day, whatever your instrument may be. But yeah, I think that was probably the first record that really rewired how I approached the whole creative uh, process, and also having to um, come up with solutions for problems that were due to the fact that I didn't really have much to work with. So I had to come up with ideas of like, oh, I wanted to have. This sound, how am I going to get this sound? And then it just happened, like just to give you a quick example, I was playing a show in Cologne, and there was the cathedral in Cologne there. So I had my little Zoom, handheld recorder or whatever. And I went in kind of cheekily and recorded a C note from the organ there, and that became my organ sound essentially. You can hear in the recording that I did, you can hear people walking around and like all these little noises from the cathedral. But it works. So it was coming up with things like that to create and build instruments and sounds from a lot of things that I captured while traveling essentially, and like recording different things, or a bell, or any kind of sound, and then use that and put them into a sampler, and then start work from that, and gathering like or creating like a palette of sounds essentially to work on an album. So
That had to have been stressful to have lost all of that material, to be moving from one
oh
side of
yeah.
the country to the other. Is there a tension that you hear in the music that relates to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like there's a lot of emotions into it, just working out through the many different layers of the I guess the stages of grief, if you want to call it that. And but at the same time, I think that record for me was not just like, you put out a record and it does its thing or whatnot, and does this, the cycle or whatever, tour record, and whatnot. But to me, it was more of almost like a lifeline in a way, because that was kind of like where the foundation to building a new studio and you know developing what I developed afterwards. That's where it really started. So it was a bit of like, yeah, it was really stressful and a horrible time, but at the same time, um, I guess there was a lot of opportunity as well, in the sense that um, I wasn't bounded by old sketches or ideas or anything like that. I could just you know have a clean slate and start all over. And that's, I guess that's the silver lining to it, in a way. I think like it taught me a lot of things as well. Like, there are all these things that happen to you that you can't control, they just happen. And the only thing you can really control about it is how you view it, you know.
Why do you think it was so well received?
I have no idea, to be honest. Like I don't really think about these things too much, you know. I think, um, you know, to me, like when I think of any music that I've written, I don't think of it in those terms at all, like whether it's good or bad or impactful or not impactful or whether it had success or not success, or I just don't really view it that way. I think to me, like whenever I put a record, it does whatever it's going to do. And once I put it out there, it just kind of left the room essentially. And I have no control over it. So all I can control is how I perceive it myself. And so I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, what it means or what does anything mean in terms of like, what is success or what is like, how do you even quantify or measure those things? Why, um, this record is received in a certain way and then another record is not received in a certain way. I don't really spend a lot of energy into these things. I'd rather spend the time that I have and the energy that I have in making new work, and also nowadays I spend a lot of time going through records that I've released that I actually have um, parts for, like masters or pre-masters or mix downs or things like that, so I can then little by little reissue some of these things that are out of print. And that's kind of where I'm spending a lot of my energy these days, which is going through catalog that I've since reacquired the rights for it and figure out ways to reissue it, and especially things that are really there were really limited edition cassettes or things like that. There was like Midnight Colors, for example, when that came out originally in 2018, I believe. That was a really limited edition cassette of only 80 copies. And they were sold out like within a few days or something like that. And then you can see the cassettes on Discogs like afterwards, within a few months or something like that, and they were selling for like, I think I saw the cassettes for like $8 or something like that, and they were being resold on Discogs for like 80 or something like that. Um so for a while, like I was thinking this should be probably reissued and make available for people in an affordable way, because obviously people want to hear it or want to buy it, like the physical product. They just don't want to like, stream it or something like that. And it would be nice to reissue it and reissue it properly on a way that is sustainable, in a way that it's impactful, and in a way that it kind of creates a new connection for the audience as well.
How does it feel to go back and listen to all of this old material?
It's interesting. I've been working a lot with my friend Stephan Mathieu um, to remaster a lot of it. And I'm a master engineer myself, but I don't really work on my music. When it comes to that, I always tell people that I cherish having like an additional ear, someone that you trust to listen to it as well and sit with it and kind of just give you some feedback, and kind of uh, tell you, oh yeah, this is okay, or no, you can work on this a little bit more, or what about this, or could you even think about it in these terms, So going back to material, like a lot of times, and this might be like the Catholic thing, where you hate everything that you do, like self-doubt is like a massive issue, growing up Catholic. So, but basically I'll go back and I'll listen to it, and then I listen to it, oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? Like this is horrible. Like how can I how can I make this better? So then I'll open a session because of those kind of materials. I do have the session, so I can go back and listen to the session, and then I'll start to work on something. I remember I worked on a few of the pieces for Midnight Callers, and I remember I sent it to Stefan. I was like, hey, I'm gonna send you the original version. You know, this is the original mix, and here's the new version that I made, like I don't know, a few years ago. And let me know, what do you think? You know, should we do this? Should we do like this new version of the piece, like new mixes and whatnot, and then you master, or should we go with the original mix, you know, with all its flaws and whatnot? And you know, he spent some time with it and he was to it, and then he thought, you know, like the new mixes are definitely excellent in terms of like technical proficiency. You know, like you've clearly become way better at doing this stuff than you were back then. But there's really something to it. There's some sort of rawness to the original version that I think you should stick to it, and you should just, you know, we just master it again or remaster it and put it out. And I think you should, you know, you should do that. And I really thought about it for a very long time. And I remember having this discussion with another friend of mine who I work a lot in the studio, this producer friend of mine, and he also likes the music a lot. And he'll say, Raf, like, listen, don't tinker with it. Like once you've released something and you put it out there, it's no longer yours, you know? So don't mess with it. Just, you know, leave it as is, have it remastered, re-release it, and that's that, you know. And I gave it more thought, and these ideas, you know, I tend to think of things for a very long time before I do them. And then, but once I get something sorted, and there's no going back. It's like I'm committed fully. So then I really took it to heart, and that's what I did. That's exactly what we did. We just, you know, roll with the original and let it sit, you know. And it's the same with this version of a Fragile Geography. There were only one minor thing that was done to a mix, which was there was a track that I thought could have used an extra 30 seconds of music. So I extended it by 30 seconds, more like an edit than an actual mix thing. And then yeah, Stefan just kind of I told him just do your thing and I trust whatever you're going to do. And sure enough, he sent me back the first pass of the masters and I listened to them in my studio and I thought I really like what he did. I really like the approach of what he's doing to it. I wouldn't have approached it this way myself, but I'm really loving what he did. And I think that that's an important part of the relationship between like the producer, artist, you know, myself being the producer and artist on this record, and like your engineers, you know, whether it's your mix engineer or your master engineer, you know, and having that kind of conversation and being able to have a dialogue and kind of, you know, go back and forth and just think of it as the interpretation of the other person that's completely removed from your own, you know, body and from your own sense of self. And I think music, generally speaking, is infinitely better when you can collaborate with others and you play with others and you do things in with that mindset of like you don't know everything and you can't possibly know everything, and thus having external output is critical.
You've commissioned a number of reworks as part of the celebration of this re-release.
Yes.
How does that play into everything you're describing?
That was a this idea that I had where I thought I wanted to, for a long time, I've thought about wanting to have reworks of my own music done by other people, but then of course a lot of older material, I don't have any like parts to give to people. That's number one. But also, so this is the first project that I thought, oh, actually, I do have all the stamps for this, and I have all these things. So maybe, and I think the only criteria that I've used and was that everyone that was going to do a rework was someone who, when the record had come out like originally, they really liked it. And they had sent me like a message at the time, think about like, 10 years ago. And they had said, "Hey, I really love this record, like fantastic, or whatnot." And this is the primary criteria that I use was they either liked it or they found something about it that they found uh, or heard something that they thought was interesting or inspiring or whatever. And this is how it started. And so basically, everyone that I've approached was within that criteria of of parameters, like it wasn't just like, oh, let's, do X, Y, or Z because of whatever, metric on streaming or none of that stuff. It was really personal. Like it had to be, and this is um how I thought also made it more impactful, at least for me, because it created that connection with the artists as well. And a lot of them are artists that I've actually worked with for years as well. So there's this kind of, connection that's pretty deep. It's not just like, there was no commercial thought to it. In fact, like I was very keenly aware that, okay, I'm gonna actually um, spend some money doing this, and I'll probably never recoup any of it. So, but it was something that I really wanted to do for the sake of the joy of doing it, and also I thought, it could be really fun for people who follow the music and have something special done for them as well. Not just, it's just not for me. It's just more like, what would the audience would like to hear, kind of situation.
Yeah,
And
it's a beautiful gift you've
you
given
know,
your
just
listeners.
Well, thank you. So we'll see how it goes. I'm curious once everything's out. We've been releasing these things kind of like little by little and taking our time with it. For a number of reasons, and I think yeah, I look forward to hear when I hear someone talk about it and say, "Oh, this is kind of a really nice gift." It really actually means something to me, like because that's kind of like the the primary motivation for it. It has to be meaningful. It's not for the sake of doing, something. It's all interconnected. It's a small community of people, and I think it's an important thing.
What's next for you?
I'm playing some shows, and I'm usually in the studio for the most part. Like I'm just working like crazy, like on tons of projects. And But I'm going back on to play some shows. I'm playing in Tbilisi in Georgia in 2 weeks, and that will be on July 17th at this festival in Tbilisi, and it's the second time that I'll be going to Tbilisi to play, and I really look forward to it. I really love the Georgian people, and I love Tbilisi. The city's beautiful, and I really hope that it goes well. And then afterwards, I'm going to Spain, and then I've been kind of living between two places at the moment. So uh, so yes, that's kind of like my summer, and then in the autumn we have shows happening. I'm playing shows with Abu Mogard again in the autumn. We're playing in Germany, other places, and then also we're spending most of the summer putting together a second LP for our project together. We recorded like a ton of music earlier this year because we did a 3-day residency in Berlin, and we recorded every single thing that we did there. So the whole point was to gather material to, for a new album, and it went really well. And we had so much material recorded. I think we recorded probably close to 3 hours worth of material when we were there. So, and then I did another residency in Utrecht, also in the spring, and I spent that whole residency recording as well, which is something that I don't have the luxury of these days because I'm always busy in the studio working on other projects for other artists. So to take the time to be like, oh, it's a whole week of doing nothing but spending, 8 hours a day recording music and making something. So I was working on this AV project with Jacco Schilp, which is a Dutch visual artist, and in order for the video to work, I had to be feeding audio to it constantly. So I figure out, well, since I'm gonna have to be playing the entire time that he's making parameters and doing, because it's reactive video, it's like all point cloud stuff. So in order for it to work, audio has to be running, but the audio that I'm sending is all improvised of loops that I'm making with the guitar. So I figure, well, might as well just spend the next 7 hours recording the whole thing that I do. So I start to do that every day, every single, rehearsal, every single, working and working and working and recording. And I think I came up with about a good 150 minutes worth of pieces that are, you know, workable that I can work on. And so I've been spending a lot of time going through that material and writing pieces. So then I think I finished a whole album worth from that for this concept that we're developing for the point cloud. And so I'm spending a chunk of time doing that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, just
Wonderful. Well, we
yeah,
can't wait, Rafael. Thank you
yeah.
for this very
Well,
much.